So we are in our final unit for the semester, and this is going to be usability testing and web design, and it's going to be broken into 3 different parts. So it is pretty lengthy. That is why we had a shorter unit for the pop translation, and also why it's broken up. So 4.1 is going to be due April 15th, 4.2 April 22nd, and 4.3 May 11th, which will be the actual final. So the third component of this will act as your final project as well. So assignment 4, usability test for website redesign. As I said, the very final 4.3 will be in May 11th, but you will have 2 other assignments that are components of this due before that. So please do keep that in mind, and please also be sure to always check due dates for the different components and read closely as you're moving through the components, returning to the assignment sheet. So let's look at the description. You work for a company that specializes in website redesign, and your boss has tasked you with finding a local website that is flawed so your company can gain a new client. Your boss doesn't care what kind of company or organization you find. He just wants you to find a website that needs some serious work to pin down a new contract. Your company is dedicated to user-centered design, and so after you found a website and sent the prospective client a proposal, you will go on to do a usability test to find the biggest flaws and make changes based on the user's needs. The testing both provides more information for your company as they redesign the site, and it also provides the potential client with evidence of the current website's flaws. Most importantly, it uses real users' responses to the website to figure out what is working and what is not. So let's break that down into the actual tasks. Assignment 4 is, like I said, broken down into 3 parts in which teams of 4, so you will be working in groups, will 1, propose to redesign a flawed website to your client, 2, test the website's usability, and 3, create a lab report in which you describe your suggestions for website changes to the potential client. Now, you have already been signed in groups. I asked you last week if you had any preferences, and I grouped you according to responses. If you did not respond, I just randomly assigned you. If you still have not looked at who your group members are, please do that today. It is critical that you get into contact with your group members as soon as possible. I have a discussion board open where you can start talking to one another there, but you're welcome to just hop right into direct email. I do want to know that you're contacting your group members right now, though, as we need to hit the ground running. All right, so let's answer the question, what is a usability test, since this seems to be a big part of this assignment. According to Steve Krug, who is the author of the book we'll be using throughout this entire unit, Rocket Surgery Made Easy, a usability test is, quote, watching people try to use what you're creating, designing, building, or something you've already created, designed, or built with the intention of A, making it easier for people to use, or B, proving that it is easy to use. In a nutshell, usability testing is taking a product, giving it to a real-life user that is the imagined audience, seeing how well they navigate the thing or can use the thing. This should ring a bell because you've done a very miniature version of this when you did your instruction set, when you had someone who had little experience use your instruction set to see what you needed to change about it. You've done like a mini usability test. We're going to take the skills you gain from that. We're going to use them, but build on them in this. It is the reason I had you do that, other than the fact it made you write a better instruction set, is I was preparing you to do a more in-depth and professional usability test. So in this assignment, you're just going to find a poorly designed website. You're going to run a usability test to find out how successfully or poorly the site is designed for its intended users and purposes. This is really important to keep in mind, that we have to put it into discussion of the intended users and the purposes of the website. And you will run a usability test with 1 user. I want you to note you are only going to have 1 testing participant and run 1 usability test. Most of the student samples you're going to look at are going to include 2. Yours is going to look a little bit different. This is an online class. It's harder to get together with classmates. So instead of doing 2, we're just doing 1. Please make note of that. And finally, you're going to create a lab report proposing suggestions for improvement. Basically, you're going to do a website redesign proposal. You're going to do a usability protocol memo in 4.2, which is just basically going to lay out, hey, this is everything that we're going to do. This is what the test is going to look like. This is the scenarios we're going to give. And then you're going to do the final usability lab report. I will explain each of these components in more depth, first in this lecture and then lectures to come as well. This lecture I'll only be looking at 4.1 because that's all we need to focus on right now. Later on in the unit, you're going to see lectures for 4.2 and 4.3 where I get into more depth. So let's look at 4.1, which is due April 15th. The description is this is the first part of the 3-part assignment in which you will propose to redesign a website specifically to your client. Please do not forget you are speaking not to me, but to your client. In this stage, you will create a proposal document for your client. This will be the owner of the website that you're looking at. This document must do the following. So to begin, you're going to choose a small-scale website, preferably from a local business or academic department. These are the places that you're going to find websites that could probably use the most work, so they are usually the easiest to get into. Also, it's going to be easier to write to the client and find out who it is. So try to pick a local business or an academic department. Universities are famous for not having fantastic websites because it's usually their department that's creating it, not a website designer. So these are good places to look. And you just want to find one that you think has several flaws that you can improve upon. So there are different components to this, and part 1 is users and purposes. This is going to come in the introduction. You're going to identify what the primary goals of the site are and who you think the target audience for the site is by writing a user persona. So you're going to create that persona like we already have, so you can use the same template. Use the feedback that you've gotten from your persona before to write a really fleshed out great persona for this. But you're also going to write an introduction where you identify 3 main purposes of the website and write about the intended audience using that persona as kind of the basis as you describe the audience needs and the purpose of the website. So this is part 1. This is the introduction. I've offered a couple of examples that have come from students in the past. These are not perfect examples, but they are examples to show you the way people have kind of tackled the introductions. I'm going to read one, but not the other. So let's look at the second one here that focuses specifically on an OU website. Of all the departments at the University of Oklahoma, the College of Engineering is perhaps one of the largest, and with the large department comes an equally large website. The College of Engineering's website allows visitors a glimpse of the inner workings of the college, including the different schools and various activities that take place throughout the school year. However, with such an extensive website, there are bound to be some issues that affect the usability of the site. In this proposal, there are 3 pages we recommend for revision: the home page, the academics and programs page, and the student life page. While there are other issues on other pages, we feel that correcting these pages will make the site overall more user-friendly. So this is just an example of one part of the introduction that lays out kind of basically what the website's main purposes are, and then zeroes in on how they're going to look at different places, different pages in particular. So this is just an example, and you will see more examples as we go, but keep in mind the way that you need to lay out the main purposes and goals of the site, and you keep the user and the intended audience in mind as you do that. Part 2. It's going to be a flaws analysis. So you're going to identify the design flaws of the website. You must analyze 3 specific pages, a home page, and 2 secondary pages. You can see back on the introduction that we just looked at, they mentioned that in the preview of what the proposal is going to do. So you need to do this visually using screen captures and labels. Furthermore, you need to describe these flaws in terms of your target users and their goals on the website. And this section needs to reference our unit readings and the lectures. You don't just randomly say what's going wrong, you actually reference readings, best practices, and use terms and information that you've gotten from the readings and the lectures as well. Also, be sure that your screen captures are clear and that they're labeled. I noticed that a lot of us had some or forgot to label our images. Be sure that they're figure 1 and that you refer to figure 1 when you're discussing this certain component. Number 3, you're going to do a competitor analysis. So you're going to identify one other website that is of the same kind, purpose, and or business as the website you're redesigning. You'll describe how this site works better or solve the problems your chosen website is having. This is going to help you demonstrate to your client that there are people doing the same thing but more effectively, so they actually have a kind of idea of the ways that their website can be improved. The 4th part is the proposal. You're going to conclude by proposing a usability test. So this is the main move you're making in the proposal, as you're saying, see, I've looked at your website. This is what it needs to do. This is your target audience. These are the main flaws on these pages. Here's one that's doing it better. Now I'm going to propose a usability test to you, my client, to suggest that we see what are the most serious flaws that need to be addressed to make this website work better. You're going to specify in this proposal section the 2 specific tasks or flaws you're going to run the usability test for and why. So you've laid out a lot of flaws. Now you're going to narrow it down to 2, and you're going to say we're going to test this and this. The reason needs to be connected directly back to the purpose that you've already set out and the user's needs. So don't randomly pick the tasks or flaws. Make sure that you're picking the one that speaks most to what the website needs to do, considering the purpose, the organization or business that it is, and the user's needs. In this section, you also need to do a little bit of convincing on why a usability test will be beneficial to your client. These things cost money, and you're talking to someone who's going to have to pay for it, so you need to convince them that the best way to do this is to do a usability test. You are selling them on the idea of a usability test in this section. You need to describe a little bit more general information on the type of usability test as well. And this you're going to reference Krug's readings that we've done. The Krug reading is really quick read, but super helpful and informative. And you're going to reference that as we work through these different assignments. All right, so I have provided the assignment rubric. I'm not going to read all of it because your ears will go numb, but I wanted to provide this here. Please read the rubrics as you're working through your assignments, especially as you're kind of doing your revisions after peer feedback, because this is exactly how I grade you. I do not deviate from these. By reading the rubric and going over the prompt, you are going to make sure that you have every main component that you need, that you don't get 20 whole points taken off because you missed an entire section. So please be sure to go through this. You'll notice in alternatives here, this is just the competitor website. I wanted to call that out because it's not worded the exact same. So alternatives is basically just the one website that you presented to them that does a better job at reaching its audience. All right, things to make sure you have for 4.1. You need to be writing to your client. This also means that you need to have the names and contact information of the client. You need to think of including the client theme colors, the logo, etc. in the memo, so you're really connecting with the client. You need a formal cover page and table of contents. Don't assume your client knows what this assignment is or the requirements. You need to write to the client the way that you really would. So make this as realistic as possible. Your intro needs to provide a nice summary of who your client is as a brand and what the goal of their website might be. Make sure your critiques are geared towards the brand identity. So you're not just speaking in generally, you're speaking to a specific client, and the wording that you use and the way that you lay everything out is speaking back to the identity of the client. Be sure that you're critiquing but not insulting as you work through. Remember, you're talking to the person that owns this website. They might be the creator of the website. They might not, but they're definitely the person that okayed it. So if you're insulting their website, you're not going to win very many points with them. So you need to walk that delicate balance of critiquing but not insulting. You need to build this for scannability, but also depth. So you don't want just paragraphs like a classical essay that you would write in an English or a history course, but you also don't want everything bulleted. This is a professional proposal, so you're going to have some more lengthy, paragraph form text, but you're also going to have bullets in certain places, so it's scannable. You want certain parts to stand out. Think about the information that they need to hit that they can scan real quick and see, oh, I see what that is. Big bullets that kind of call their attention to most important things, and the paragraphs to get into depth. Remember that your client has no idea what a usability test is, nor do they know about good web design. So you have to teach them about this within these assignments. And don't just make up the info. Cite best practices and examples using our readings in the lectures. And then each problem should also show a possible solution from the competitor. So as you're talking about a problem, you can point to that competitor analysis for the solution. Be sure that you're using a template or mimicking one as you're doing the memo. Also, the images are incredibly important. So be sure that you label them with arrows pointing to key attributes, provide a caption, refer to figures in your body text. Please be sure to do this. This is really important for these. And then some troubleshooting. So be sure that you are reading over the assignment sheets thoroughly as you're working on it, and especially as you're doing your final revisions to make sure that you have addressed all the components. Go over the rubric as well. This is what I use to grade, and I do not deviate from it. And here are some common errors. So in the introduction, the intro does not thoroughly address each component required in depth. So remember, you need to explain both the website and the audience, and you need to keep in mind the branding identity of the client. So you need to balance all these things as you do this. Audience or client isn't clearly defined. You need to remember that you should be crafting the document to speak to a client, not to me, not to some general person. You're talking to the owner of the website. So you need to be sure that you're speaking to them and that you're also clearly defining the audience that you are considering as you talk about how effective or ineffective the website is. The user isn't kept in mind during all the analyses. So remember that the user is different from the client and that we're all about user-centeredness. So everything that you discuss as you talk about either flaws or strengths, it needs to come back to how well the user can respond or navigate or understand something. Another common problem is that the analyses don't include enough detail. Don't get surface level. Be sure that you're using the readings. You're really referring to best practices as you explain what works and doesn't work. The images not being labeled or utilized. Be sure that you're, like I said in the last slide, you're using arrows, you're using captions, you're using descriptions, and you're referring to the images throughout. And be sure that your proposal is persuading the client to do the usability test. Remember, the key to that is not just saying, hey, your website has some flaws, but hey, you really should do a usability test. You don't want them to think, oh, well, they pointed out the flaws, so we're good to go. We don't need to do a usability test. It needs to have persuasive elements as to why the usability test is going to be really beneficial. And as far as the images go, this is just a really quick example of how to utilize an image that you want to provide arrows. So you're pointing out to the specific things that you're referencing in the body text, that you're using actual text within this to point out certain components. Remember, your client may have no idea what a good website looks like or what a website needs to have in it. So really use the images to call attention to that. So this is what you're going to be doing for the first part of the assignment. If you have any questions at all, please let me know. And do be sure that you are in constant contact with your group members right now.